to today's meeting, which is hosted by the Virtual International Consortium for Truth Research, or VICTR. VICTR is an online community of scholars with an interest in the value and nature of truth, broadly construed, and we welcome anyone with interest in these issues. Our mission is to give researchers a platform for sharing their work with a virtual community of colleagues, to foster an environment of critical and constructive feedback, to promote gender, racial and ethnic inclusivity amongst those doing work on truth, and to support research in all areas of the philosophy of truth. We'd like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, the Future of Truth Project at the University of Connecticut Humanities Institute and the University of Waikato and the University of Alabama, who make all of VICTR's activities possible. We have a VICTR mailing list, a website, a Facebook group, Twitter, and a YouTube channel. Some of the links to these are posted in the chat. Our next talk after today is on November 17th at 10 AM Eastern, and that will be Jin-Yol Kim giving a talk on Frege on logic, the truth value true, and logic qua the science of truth. Okay, so today we are very pleased to welcome Kensuke Ito from the University of Connecticut. And he's going to be giving a talk entitled A Challenge to Tractatus 4.062 and Two Types of Theories of Truth. This was a pre-read session, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at Ken's paper. And I think that there's a link to that in the chat if you haven't had a chance to look at that, but Ken's going to give us a presentation on the paper as well. So welcome, Ken, to begin his presentation.
And thank you for introducing me, and thank you everyone for coming to this talk. The title is A Challenge to Tractatus 4.062 and Two Types of Theories of Truth. So let's move on. So today the topic is the passage from Tractatus 4.062. And here Wittgenstein asks the question, can we not make ourselves understood with false propositions just as we have done up till now with true ones, so long as it is known that they are meant to be false? And Wittgenstein answers no, because our proposition is true if we use it to say that things stand in a certain way, and they do, and if by quote P we mean not P, and things stand as we mean that they do, then construed in the new way, quote P is true and not false. Therefore, it's impossible for communication with false propositions. So the claim here is this: it is impossible to make ourselves understood with false propositions, even if it is known that they are meant to be false. And the reason is that, for example, if by snow is black, we mean that snow is not black, this sentence is true, construed in the new way. In this sense, falsity-directed communication is taken to be impossible in this passage. And this claim is not only in Wittgenstein, but also in other thinkers in the analytic tradition. So I'd like to focus on the claim, not as only as Wittgenstein's claim, but also as a general claim entrenched in the analytic tradition. So I have two goals today. First one is to reject the 4.062 claim. And the second one is to apply the conclusion to Dammett's analogy between asserting and winning, and try to draw some consequences for theories of truth. So here's the plan. The first one, in the first section, I'd like to examine how the 4.062 claim has been entrenched in the analytic tradition. So I'll quickly consider Dammett, Lewis, and Davidson's passages. And here is my overall kind of argumentation. I will argue that there are two possibilities for communication with false propositions. And the first option is what I think Wittgenstein had in mind. That is negative notation, I'd like to call it. So section 2 illustrates how the 4.6062 argument works. But there's another possibility I'd like to propose, which is the genuine case for communication with false propositions. So in section 3, I'd like to present how the falsity game option rejects the 4.062 claim. And finally, I'd like to draw some consequences for the theories of truth. Especially, I'd like to construct a Dametian, I'd like to call it Dametian argument against deflationism. Very simple argument. So let's look at first Damet. This is the passage from R.E. Damet's article Truth, and I'd like to skip reading that. And here's my reconstruction. So according to Damet, let's suppose for reductio that Frege's theory is correct. Then content is given before we assert or deny according to Frege's framework. Thought is given before we judge. Then, as said in the emphasized part, there could be people who expressed the same thoughts but went in instead for denying them, which is absurd. We can see from the modality here. So Damet says supposition is false, so content is not given in advance of our going in for asserting. So he sort of established some assertion-based account of truth concept. But here I focus on premise 3 that claims that denial-based communication is impossible, right? And according to Cohen, Damet's claim here is just made based on Wittgenstein's 4.062 claim. So this is the connection. And the second example is Lewis on liaries. And I'd like to skip reading the passage, but liaries is a language like English, but with all the truth values reversed. So in English, for example, in English, snow is white means that snow is white, which is true. In liaries, snow is not white means that snow is white, which is true. Or snow is black means that snow is not black, which is also true. So liaries is equivalent to Wittgenstein's language with the new construed rule. Okay, third example is from Davison's Principle of Charity. I'd like to skip reading the passage, but including Davison gives a lot of formulations, including this passage. And other thinkers also gave a lot of formulations, but according to the Oxford Dictionary, in various versions of the formulations, the principle of charity constrained the interpreter to maximize the truth or rationality in the subject's sayings. And there is another important characteristic of the principle is this. So the principle is taken to be an a priori constraint on radical interpreters. So in short, to hold the principle of charity is to take the principle that foreigners aim at truth to be the a priori constraint on radical interpreters. That is to conceptually exclude the possibility of communication with where everyone aims at falsity. So that's how the 4.062 claim is found in the analytic tradition. So I'm not gonna concern any exegetical questions about Wittgenstein or Tractatus, but rather I'd like to focus on the claim as a general claim in the tradition. And next, let's look at how the argument or the claim is established. So, okay. So again, this is the passage from Tractatus 4.062. And first question is, what is proposition here? What is Tractatalian proposition. To this question, again, I like to leave aside any exegetical concerns. So here's the answer. Anything that satisfies the following locutions, namely the original const rule might be by quote P, one means that P. And the new const rule is expressed by the emphasized part, namely by quote P, one means that not P. So I'd like to accept anything that nicely satisfies those locutions. So now P must be some quotable, linguistically expressible truth-apt entities. So here I like to take it to be an interpreted sentence. And I think that is not super different from the standard interpretation of Tractatus. So I'll take propositions to be sentences, interpreted sentences. And now take the two const rules as conventions about notation, our notation. Then we get two notations, positive notation and negative notation. According to positive notation, quote P means that P. According to negative notation, quote P means that not P. And now think of English as a language whose constitutive rules involve positive notation. Then replace positive by negative notation, and then we get another language, reverse English. And reverse English is, again, equivalent to Lewis's Lyra's, namely the language like English, whose truth values are reversed. Leaving aside our fallibility in judgment, what kind of sentences are exchanged in both languages? Let P sub Pn refer to a sentence in English or sentence applied by positive notation, and let P sub Nn refer to a sentence in reverse English. Then we can get a picture for comparison, such a table. For example, by uttering English sentence snow is white, one means snow is white. By uttering reverse English sentence snow is not white, one means snow is white. So the same meaning expressed in English as a meta language, snow is white, can be expressed by different languages, English and Lyra's. And the same thing applies to the case of negative sentence, compound sentences, or sentences whose content might be vague or produce some faultless disagreement. But the distinction between English and reverse English is just neutral about those issues, because the problematic content can be expressed by different languages. So in general, we can say all sentences on the left columns are true because we try to exchange true statements. And it accords with the characterization of true statement, a true sentence in Tractatus 4.062. Wittgenstein says a sentence is true if we use it to say that things turn in a certain way, and they do. We use snow is white to say snow is white, and this corresponds to the fact, right? But the same applies to the case of reverse English sentences. For example, one says grass is red in reverse English to say grass is not red, which corresponds to the fact that grass is not red. So all sentences on the middle columns are also true if we leave aside our fallibility. Also, as the table informally shows, both languages have the same expressive power because some content can be expressed both in different languages, in English as well as in reverse English. So going back to Tractatus, Wittgenstein says, if by P we mean not P and things stand as we mean that they do, then construed in the new way, quote P is true and not false. Or in our terms, leaving aside our fallibility, reverse English sentences used in communication are true in that language. So that's why how 4.062 argument works. But I'd like to propose that there is another possibility which rejects the 4.062 claim. So I'd like to consider two different practices, truth game and falsity game. So our original question is this: can we make ourselves understood with false sentences? And Wittgenstein and Lewis answered no, by considering a language that is semantically different from English, reverse English. But I'd like to consider the practice that uses English, the same language, but follows different conversational norms, and answer yes to the first question. And I'd like to take Grice's 4 maxims for conversation to be a good approximation to the conversational norms we are actually following in daily conversation. So here are the truth rules. According to Grice, we can characterize the rules governing our regular conversation as a set of 4 maxims of conversation. First, focus on the maximum of quality. It says, according to that, we have to try to make our contribution one that is true. And it also has 2 sub-maxims about belief and about evidence for justification. And the set of there are 3 other maxims: quantity, relation, and manner. Those are simplified versions. And I'd like to call those 4 maxims the truth rules, and the linguistic practice governed by the truth rules, the truth game, or T game, in short. Then what's going to be the falsity game, falsity rules? So let's assume that change is only made on the maximum quality. Other 3 maxims remain the same, no change in grammar, reference, etc. So here is the variant maximum of quality, according to which we have to try to make our contribution one that is false, and do not say what you believe to be true, and do not say that for the falsity of which you lack adequate evidence. And other 3 maxims are kept intact. So yeah, those are the falsity rules, or F rules, and I like to call the linguistic practice governed by the F rules the falsity game, or F game. And here is the illustration of the truth game. Let's consider the speaker is Frege, and other 3 maxims force the speaker to deliver the information that snow is white. Then, of course, he needs to produce some truth, so he would say snow is white. Then it means the content snow is white. And between the speaker and the expressed content, the relation acceptance obtains, or the relation doxastic or propositional attitude, usually called belief, but I like to call it acceptance. And according to the standard picture of assertion theory, or especially based on attitudinal account of assertion, we'd like to find that the primary illocutionary act in the truth game is assertion. One asserts some sentence to the content expressed by the sentence. The speaker has a positive attitude. But let's look at the case of falsity game and assume that he needs to utter snow is black. He needs to deliver the information that snow is not black. And he needs to produce some falsehoods, so he would say snow is black. And this this just means content that snow is black. Sorry. He says snow is black, and that means the content snow is black, but the speaker has negative attitude, doxastic attitude towards the content snow is black, or I'd like to call it rejection instead of disbelief. So the primary act of elocutionary act in the falsity game is going to be denial. And here is how the communication is possible. So assume that Frege thinks it is false that snow is black. And he also thinks he needs to produce falsehoods, so he would say snow is black. Then the hearer trusts Frege's sincerity and reliability, so what he says is false. Then the hearer can infer it is not the case that snow is black. Similarly, if the speaker thinks it is true that snow is white and needs to produce the information that's whiteness of snow, then he would just say snow is not white. And in general, if we are in the situation to produce some proportional information P, then in the F game, we can just utter not P. Then the hearer trusts the sincerity and reliability of the speaker, so he can infer it is not the case that snow is not white. So if he believes double negation, it's just, he can just infer it is the case that snow is white. So the communication is possible. It's an informal characterization. But now let's express a bit more rigid way. So let PTR refer to the sentence used in the truth game, and let FR refer to the sentence used in the falsity game. Then in the falsity game, 1 and 2 obtain. First, by quote P, 1 means that P, because the falsity game players use English. And second, the falsity game maintains the expressive and communicative power of the truth game. As to expressive power, we can find that one can utter P in the truth game if and only if one can utter not P in the falsity game. And as we just seen, the hearer of P in the F game ascribes to the speaker the belief content that not P. So communication is successful. It follows from 1 and 2 that we can make understood ourselves with false sentences. And there could be some objection to the first part of my claim by P1's mean that P, appealing to the distinction between speaker meaning and sentence meaning. And if there is any related question, I'd like to go back to that point in the Q&A, but here I'd like to just skip the objection and reply. So here is the first conclusion I'd like to draw. So again, the question is, can we make ourselves understood with false sentences just as we have done up to now with true ones? And I'd like to answer, yes, we can. And argument is, the premise is just right now, we can play the different games with the same language, English. Therefore, it is possible for us to make ourselves understood with false sentences. That's the very situation of the falsity game. But of course, in any natural language community, people play the T game, truth game. So I'm not suggesting that it is really possible, the falsity game is actually possible. Rather, I like to say we must take the priority of truth-guided communication as a non-conceptual, or I'd like to say empirical priority. So we cannot establish the priority from some necessary, conceptually necessary argument or something. That's the first conclusion, and I'd like to apply the conclusion to draw some consequences for the theories of truth. in the last 10 minutes or something. So again, this is the passage from Dammit, and here is the reconstruction. Suppose that Frege's theory is correct, then content is given before we assert or deny. Then there could be people who expressed the same thoughts, but went in instead for denying them. So supposition is false, content is not given in advance of our going in for asserting, because denial-based communication is absurd according to Dammit. So premise 3 claims that denial-based communication is impossible. But according to the conclusion, given the playability of the falsity game, premise 3 doesn't work. Therefore, the argument as a whole doesn't work, or it doesn't reach an absurdity, because the possible F situation of the F game is not conceptually absurd. That's the application of the conclusion to Dammit's argument, but Dammit's argument serves to indicate a sharp distinction between two types of theories of truth, which we can clearly formulate in terms of the difference of two games right now. Leaving aside the details of the debate between Frege and Dammit concerning assertion or the question whether the sentences are the names of truth values, let's leave aside those details and let us focus on the applicability of the theory to the games. There is a theory, according to Dammit's argument, there is a theory that applies to both the truth game and the falsity game. And per Dammit, this application does not undermine the adequacy of a theory of this type, because the falsity game is possible. But still, Dammit can argue that an adequate theory of our concept of truth need to be a theory that only applies to the truth game. And let me illustrate this argumentation appealing to Dammit's analogy with chess. So let's consider two games: chess, the game of aiming at checkmating, and the variant of chess, the game of aiming at being checkmated. And leave aside the question of whether such a variant game is playable or enjoyable in a sense. Let's leave aside that question. Then according to Dammit, we can consider something called formal description, namely a set of records of initial position, the permissible moves of each piece, and the end position where there is no permissible move. Formal description describes those things. And the point is that formal descriptions apply to both games, chess and its variant. In contrast, on the other hand, we can say it is a part of our concept of chess that we are aiming at checkmating. Then a theory of the notion of chess, which we are accustomed to employ, must be a theory that only applies to chess, explaining something more than the formal description. The theory of chess must be particularly about the game of chess, not the variant of chess. Now we can directly make the analogy. We can stop analogy and we can directly compare two games, the truth game and the falsity game. And now formal description can be considered to be a formal theory, namely descriptions applicable to both games. We can think in this way, but on the other hand, now Dammit claims it is a part of the concept of truth that we aim at making true statements. So an account of the notions of truth and falsity, which we are accustomed to employ, must be a theory that only applies to the truth game. So let's call such a theory a material theory, just for the sake of argument, just for the sake of comparison. So there need to be a material theory that only applies to the truth game. Okay, so we can characterize a formal theory of truth as a set of descriptions that applies to both games. And in contrast, a material theory of truth is a set of descriptions that applies only to the truth game. And I like to call the Dammet's claim the Dammet point. Namely, it says an adequate theory of our concept of truth must be a material theory. And here is my proposal in this presentation, or my observation. A deflationary theory of truth is a formal theory, it looks to me. And so let's consider a formal theory. Again, formal theory of truth is a set of descriptions that applies to both games. And I like to consider deflationary theory of truth as a theory that composed of two leading tenets. The first one is T-schema. P is true if and only if P. And the second tenet is the claim about the role of truth predicate. The role of the truth predicate consists in the logical role, namely generalization. And I'd like to call those the theory composed of those two tenets deflationary theory of truth. And I'd like to think that deflationary theory of truth is a formal theory because as to the T-schema, F-gamers accept but cannot utter T-schema, or F-gamers retain the dispositions to accept any T-schema. For example, they all accept snow is black is true if and only if snow is black. And snow is not black, actually. Therefore, they can say snow is not black. They can say snow is black is true because snow is black is snow is not black. And yeah, they can retain the dispositions to accept the T-schema. And as to the generalization role, F-gamers can say what the swindler said is true in order to reject what the swindler said. Or they can say every sentence of the form P and not P contradiction is true. So they can make use of the generalizing role of the truth predicate even if in the falsity game. So those two descriptions can apply to both games, namely truth game and the falsity game. Instead, in contrast, let's consider material theory quickly. This is a set of descriptions that applies only to the truth game. And I like to focus on the extension of the concept of truth here. And question is, what kind of sentences do we exchange? Or in Dammet words, what kind of sentences are we aiming at? Setting aside our fallibility in the truth game is the set of sentences that are true in English. And in the falsity game is the set of sentences that are false in English. So material theory can be characterized as a theory of the concept of truth whose extension is the set of sentences true in English. So from this point, I'd like to suggest that a material theory can be a substantivist theory because the truth concept is substantial as it specifies, as it explains what we are aiming at. We are aiming at true statements, not the false statements. That kind of distinction is managed by material theory. And to study a material theory is to admit that there is something shared by all and only true in English sentences. So I'm not ready to get into the metaphysical concerns about the property of truth, but I can say there is some, to admit a material theory is to admit there is something shared by all and only true in English sentences. If there is any related suggestion about the substantive theory, I'd like to go back to some slides in the Q&A. So here is the final slide, conclusion, the second conclusion, and I like to call a Dametian argument. Premise one, the Damet point, an adequate theory of our concept of truth must be a material theory. Premise two, my proposed observation is a deflationary theory of truth is a formal theory. So conclusion, a deflationary theory of truth is not an adequate theory of our concept of truth. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.